Statistically, 16% of Florida drivers are uninsured. So there's quite a few people driving around.
Did you say 16?
16% of Florida drivers are uninsured.
It's not a law?
60% of the people in Florida driving cars flout the law. They don't comply with the law. But that's not the whole story. Auto insurance is one of the things that most people have. More people own cars or have cars, drive cars, than have houses. So they're more familiar with that than homeowners insurance, which is another very common type of insurance people have. There are rules in auto insurance for coverage. For instance, you have to disclose all the people you live with, the home, because that's an issue of what's covered and what's not covered.
Welcome to Not Another TV Lawyer.
I'm Chris Shakib.
I'm Jessica Hall.
And this is a podcast sponsored by the law firm Terrell Hogan that's been in Jacksonville for greater than 50 years.
And we are very passionate about helping people and personalizing our service to help them get the service they deserve.
Car insurance will drop you for everything because that's what they did. That's why I needed Chris. I was rightfully hit. And they noticed my name had changed and they were like, whoa, 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 you didn't tell us there's this other person in the house. I was like, I've been married to him. We've been in this house for 4 years. What do you mean? So it's almost like this loophole that insurance companies had found.
What do you think full coverage means, Sarah?
I will not lie. My husband handles all of the insurance in my home. So what I thought full coverage meant was probably what everyone did. I thought, well, that probably entails everything. Sounds kind of in the word, quite frankly. Full coverage.
Yeah, and full coverage is one of those things that I've heard hundreds of times from clients when I ask them, tell me what type of auto insurance you have. Well, I have full coverage. And it's frustrating for me because there is no such thing as full coverage. It's something some companies will use to sell a certain type of policy that is the minimum. Full
Yes,
coverage
also
can
showing
be,
that it's effective advertising.
well, it is because you're paying for what you believe is quote unquote full coverage. And the question is full coverage, everything you can have or the statutory minimums. And more often than not, folks who believe they have full coverage only have the statutory minimums. That's one of the things that's frustrating for me when clients come in and say they have full coverage because they think they're covered and they're not. They're driving around thinking that they have protections that are simply not there. And that's the reason why I thought this should be the first episode, because it's one of the biggest misnomers that I see in my practice. People thinking that they're protected when they're not. I'm Chris Shakib, and this is the podcast, Not Another TV Lawyer. And today our guest is Matt Carlucci, and we're here to talk about auto insurance in the state of Florida.
Thank you for having me.
Matt Carlucci is a well-known auto insurance. He has an agency in Jacksonville, and I'll let him talk about that a little bit more. But beyond that, he is a member of the Jacksonville City Council and has been for a number of years. I think it was 1987 to 1994.
About 18 years when you count them up.
Yeah, and 2019 to the present, he has been City Council president. He has received the Claude Yates Award for most outstanding city council person. He was in 1992 was the one who authored the legislation that created the Jacksonville Ethics Commission. He's a graduate of University of North Florida. His office is on Hendricks Avenue in San Marco, and he is not just an insurance agent, but he's a very involved person in the city of Jacksonville, County of Duval, and has done a lot of things to help a lot of people. And so it's a privilege to have you as our first guest.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the kind introduction. And I'm happy to do whatever good I can for the great city of Jacksonville.
All right.
What can I do to help you?
So we would like to talk about auto insurance. And the reason is In my practice, we'll have people come in who've been involved in an auto accident. The first thing I ask is, "What kind of coverage do you have?" And they say, "Well, I have full coverage," and that's one of my pet peeves. First of all, is there is full coverage something in Florida?
We were taught long ago. I'm a State Farm agent, so State Farm has many years ago said never tell people or ask them, do you want full coverage? Because there's really no such thing. Um, and but there is a difference between having minimum insurance and having a nice package that will protect your risk. And when I say risk, car being hit, you a driver being injured, or a driver's child, you want to make sure that when the policyholder leaves my office, that I've done the best I can so they have a nice package, but I never tell them they have full coverage because that means so many different things to so many different people. And I thought I had full coverage. And well, you said you didn't want the rental car coverage, and you didn't want the uninsured motorist coverage. And so it's just a name that's been out there for a long time. Full coverage, no such thing.
No such thing. There's statutory minimum coverages that people have. If you're going to drive a car in Florida, there are statutory minimums that you have. And could you talk about what the minimum would be?
State required is PIP, and that is $10,000.
PIP is personal injury protection
Yes,
coverage?
sir. Yeah, I'm sorry. Personal injury protection, PIP, and that is the no fault coverage.
Now,
That-
in layman's term, when you say no, what did you just say? No fault. But I think that's very important.
Well, I'm going to explain that to you.
Okay.
Okay. So let's just say that I'm driving down the road and I get clobbered in the back and I am really hurt. Well, that is the other party's fault for repairing my vehicle. But for the first 10,000 medical payments, personal injury protection, which is the state required coverage, will pay 80% up to $10,000 of my medical bill. Once you exceed that 10,000 threshold, then you're in the area where you can try to remedy your injuries or your damages with the help of your insurance company, your insurance agent, or an attorney. And so the only thing that's not at fault is that first 10,000 medical payments. And by the way, if you are injured in a car accident, because no matter who's at fault, your own insurance pays under PIP,
Okay.
right? But you have to file a claim and have some type of medical attention within 14 days or you lose that coverage.
Right.
Right. Jessica is our expert in our office at that issue because that's not something that's always been around. They changed that. It's been what, maybe 20 years now, or maybe a little less than 20
A
years.
little less, I think.
And it used to be that you just had your coverage, but now it's a certain number of days or weeks.
Yeah, you have to have medical treatment within the first 14 days. If not, unfortunately, your personal injury protection benefits will be capped at $2,500.
And it has to be medical treatment, and a doctor has to certify that you're
That you have an emergency medical condition.
So the $10,000 now becomes $2,500
If you-
because you didn't get the attention,
Within the first 14 days.
but you can pocket the $2,500 is what I'm hearing.
No, because if you don't have any, because the way that it works is that in my experience, is that the medical payments normally the provider submits their claim for medical payment and the payment would go to the medical provider. It doesn't go to the insured.
But if this person is not getting coverage, like if he is not going in,
Then there's not any coverage to pay because he doesn't have any
so
medical
then
treatment.
he's responsible for, his back at that point.
Yes.
He's got to live with the back pain. Got it.
And your average person has no clue that that's how.
And that's very important. That's very important.
And so every time somebody that I'm taking a claim report from and all of my team members, we will explain if you're hurt, make sure you get medical attention within 14 days of the date of loss.
Hmm.
So your PIP will cover that. Personal injury protection on your policy will cover it. Even though you weren't at fault, this is the no fault law.
Okay.
So, uh, so anyway, we try to tell everybody get the medical attention you need. If they went to the rescue, to the emergency room, that's medical attention, and so forth.
We're talking about full coverage, and my clients that I've talked, when they come in and they've been in an accident, particularly a serious accident, um, they say, "Well, I want to hold the other person responsible." And my what I how I answer that is, "Well, we'll see."
Mm.
Right now, we don't know what the other person has to provide coverage for your injuries beyond PIP, and we don't know what you have to provide for your injuries beyond PIP. Could you talk about what there is beyond PIP that might help cover someone for their injuries and damages in an auto accident beyond PIP?
Well, I forgot one coverage that is also required besides PIP, and that's $10,000 property
Property damage
damage.
liability.
So that's the coverage you would have if you were at fault and you needed money to repair their vehicle. $10,000 can get swallowed up in a collision center in a nanosecond. A lot of people have heard maybe 10, 2010, or they've heard their liability spoken about in split limits, 50, 100, 25. So if somebody comes to my office, um, I try to make sure they have enough coverage to at least um, cover their fellow driver on the street, but also to protect any assets they have. I think your home. I don't think you can touch the person's home if especially if there's kids still in the house.
Right, not the homestead.
And I don't think you can touch people's 401ks or retirements. But I'm not sure about the ability to garnish those wages or those dollars that come in.
There's a limit. There's a certain amount that a head of a household can have protected of their monthly income that can't be nobody can go after to collect on.
So if somebody comes in, they got a boat. Well, I'll get to that later. But they got a car, and they have an at-fault accident. The other person's injured in a permanent fashion, or at least for 6 months of injury. You want to make sure you have some liability coverage, and so I always recommend if you can get at least 100,000 per person, 300,000 per accident. That's a good start. Now, if you're somebody that walks in my office and I don't ask them how much money they got in the bank, but if they got $1 million home and they're driving a Mercedes, Lexus, or a high value vehicle, it doesn't take me long to figure out they probably have some assets they want to protect if they injure somebody and they're at fault in that accident. So in that case, I would recommend $250,000 each person. So that means if you injure just one person in an accident, you're covered up to 250,000. But if you injure uh, two people,
The aggregate
uh,
would be 500,000?
that's
Oh, wow.
aggregate would be 500,000, no more than 250 per person. And so that's kind of the underlying limit that's required in order to get an umbrella. So what people ask all the time, well, what's an umbrella? And an umbrella is excess liability uh, that kind of umbrellas your autos, your home, your boat, whatever that you need insured. It doesn't cover property. It has nothing to do with your boat, covering your boat or your car. But what it has to do with is if you are at fault in an accident and you get papers from an attorney and they're trying to collect to remedy their client's injury, then I feel a lot better than if I just had $10,000, because they would have at least $1,250,000 coverage if they injure somebody, because the umbrella's $1 million liability. And the $1 million liability also covers over the home and your boat. Uh, it's a good way to protect your assets if you have assets that you need to protect.
So it also sounds like you kind of personalize your plans. It's not like you come in and you buy a packet and there's just, hey, it's a one
One
shoe
size
kind of
fits
fits
all.
all. It sounds like you kind of take the time to tailor your insurance plans towards your
Insureds.
Yeah,
exactly. Thank you.
I want to manage that particular customer's risk with whatever coverage that they can afford. Um, I can tell them they need an umbrella, you need this, you need
Hmm.
that. Uh, but I deal and work with a lot of people, like every agent in Jacksonville and in Florida. A lot of people are finding auto rates are going up.
Right.
And so it's tough for them to perhaps afford $250,000 coverage. But if they are making a decent income, something that would be like middle class,
Sure. Sure.
I want to make sure that they got at least 100,000 each person, 300,000 each accident. And by the way, go ahead and get 100,000 on the property damage, not the 10.
Thank you.
Because if you cream a Mercedes in the back and the bill comes to $75,000, you will be much better protected.
That's
And
a good point.
and it's important that people talk to people like Mr. Carlucci, because if people are injured and they come to Terrell Hogan, they get people like me, and I'm going to search every rock and find out where all the assets are. And if I find out you have all of these things, we will do everything in our power to recover as much money for our clients as possible.
That's awesome.
So if we're always looking to make sure, because I will review the insurance policies and see what they have. And I search public records and I search anything I need to search to find out what I need to find out. And if I find out you have like 3 houses, but only one of them's homesteaded and you've got assets, then we're going to have a much different conversation.
Right.
So,
Let me flip it a little bit here and talk about uninsured motorist,
Mhm.
because if I'm sitting at a red light, minding my own business, and I get creamed in the back, and now I can't go to work for maybe 6 months to 7 months to maybe forever, depending on how badly I'm hurt, uh, then and the driver that hits me has no insurance or just has the minimum insurance, PIP and the 10,000 property damage, it, you can't squeeze. I can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, and you can have the best attorney in the world, and they can't squeeze blood out of a turnip.
And in my experience, more people don't realize how underinsured they are until something bad happens. I
I
have
think that's my takeaway from this.
one of my closest friends is a triathlete, and so he's training in Georgia in the mountains on his bike, and someone just pulled out of their driveway in this mountain in Dahlonega and creamed him on his bike, and he had to be life flighted to Atlanta, and he was in the hospital there for a long time, and he ended up in Brooks Rehab Hospital, and
And sometimes rehab, you're only covered up to a certain amount of money on your health insurance. If that has to kick in above your PIP coverage, so it's important to me to make sure that my policyholder has adequate uninsured motors, because if they can't go to work, then they lose wages,
right.
um, particularly if they don't have disability
And
insurance.
and this friend of mine who, is very well educated, has an MBA from one of the best universities in the country. He was an executive. He was woefully underinsured.
Hmm.
And I got involved and just said, "Look, I'm not going to charge you, but I'm going to handle your case." There was coverage that applied, but because Georgia mandates, I believe, bodily injury coverage, we were able to get something. But
Mhm.
had it been in Florida, it would have been a bigger disaster
Mhm.
for this friend of mine. And
Yes, it
so
would
he
have.
he immediately changed his insurance after that. He learned, unfortunately, the hard way. But
Yeah.
it's if someone as sophisticated as he is didn't understand that. That's why, that's why this was the subject I wanted to talk about first on our podcast because it's folks don't realize how at risk they are driving on the roads of Florida.
So, what is important is to have an insurance company and an insurance agent that you can have at least a good conversation. Nowadays, so much of is done over email. My office is still kind of mom and pop. They come and see me, and I have
Well,
a big screen, and
that
I show them what the different prices would
well,
be.
so
So,
that's we
having a good agent is a
I
good thing.
you're my agent, and your agency operates like my law firm, Terrell Hogan, where the reason our podcast is not another TV lawyer is we're kind of old fashioned. People talk to us. They come to our office. We actually return phone calls and things like that. And I feel that's the way your office is when it comes to insurance.
We do our best, I'll tell you that. We can't control our rates, and we've had a number of rate increases, just like every insurance company have.
Mhm.
I haven't lost much business because even though our rates go up, people check around, and I encourage them, look, check around, and even if you got to find something less, I'll help you with the transition. And then if you make the switch and that company leaves your front doorstep dirty, we'll roll the red carpet out for you back here at State Farm at the Carlucci agency. So, um, but I really have to struggle between making sure people are covered well, but at a price they can afford. Because if
Right.
they can't afford it and they drop their insurance down to bare minimum,
They're not protected.
then they're not protected.
Florida is really for all types of insurance. Wouldn't it's one of the more expensive states. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, we are.
Certainly with homeowners, especially nowadays.
Everything.
Um, but everybody, mostly everybody, has to drive. We don't have a public transit system that's very reliable here, and so we drive in this largest most spread out city
Right.
in the country, and so auto insurance ends up being really, really important.
Yeah.
So I had another thing I wanted to talk about. You mentioned umbrella coverage before, and long time ago, when my older kids were young, we had this babysitter. She was wonderful, young lady in her 20s, early 20s, went to UNF, and she loved my kids, and she was the babysitter we used all the time. She was just one of the most delightful young ladies, and she was in a terrible accident, not her fault. Guy driving a truck ran a red light. He was
Mm,
drunk,
mm.
had prior DUIs, and she was real injured very badly. Ended up in UF Health and with a head injury, a permanent
Mm,
head injury that
mm.
affected her life
And the quality of her
forever
life. Mhm.
going forward. She was at Brooks Rehab on the head injury floor for many years, and um, that person wasn't even insured, wasn't I don't think he even had a license, at the time. He wasn't supposed to be driving,
Yeah. Mhm.
and so there was nobody to sue on the liability, and there's no bodily injury coverage that would have applied to him, and, uh, but she lived with her parents, and her parents had an umbrella policy,
Okay.
and she was able to get a seven-figure recovery from her parents' umbrella policy.
Did she have uninsured motorist on that umbrella?
Yes, that she had parents who were very sophisticated,
Mhm.
and fortunately for her, she was able to get
A recovery.
coverage that most people would not have been able to get. I mean, her
Right.
parents were they were smart, and they were definitely well-to-do, and
They
they had a
probably had
good
a great
agent.
agent like you.
Well, you might have been their
You might have been
agent
their
for all
agent,
I
yeah.
know.
Well, I find that most agents really want to do a good job for their customers, and we all have to in these days uh, give people the best coverage, the most coverage we can share with them, provide for them at a price that they can afford.
Right.
And it's always, and there are some people that come in and they are uh, quite wealthy, and so we put on the liability and we encourage the umbrella, which covers for liability if they were at fault and injured somebody, but they also will put on an uninsured motorist benefit. So if they get hit by somebody with no insurance, like your babysitter did, then luckily she could collect under the uninsured motorist that her auto policy had or her parents' auto policy had in the umbrella.
Right. I mean, if I'd say 99.9% of clients I see would not have been in that situation. That
Yeah.
is, and but for that, I don't know what her life would have been like. It would have,
Well, and there's one other thing about, you know, buying liability insurance to protect yourself. Uh, there's another thing to think about, um, and it's your fellow man, your fellow woman. I'm not sure what the saying is for that anymore, but we owe our fellow man,
Humankind.
humankind, if we injure them, to have at least enough liability to help that person get back on their feet.
yes.
And I think that's a part of of insurance that people don't think about.
I'm a member of the Florida Justice Association, have been for years, and we've lobbied for as long as I've been a lawyer for mandatory bodily injury coverage, and it never passes, but we keep trying every year.
State Farm wants mandatory. They want to get out of the PIP no fault thing.
I think mandatory BI is a better plan than PIP.
It absolutely is, but the legislature never does. It never goes that way.
So
So
if our listeners want to contact you and have you review their insurance coverage, how would they get a hold of you?
uh, just I guess go to Matt Carlucci State Farm on your Google. They can call me at my number, which is 904-399-5544, or they can email me at matt@mattcarlucci.com. And I'm happy to review people's insurance anytime they want to. Uh, and actually, I have a great team at my office, and so they do a lot of sale for me. What I try to do is be the risk manager and tell people what the big story is and what coverages they truly need, and then I'll have my team member come back and work up the premium.
Well, that has been my experience with your office. I have my homeowners there too. And, we bought a house a couple years ago. We moved from the San Marco area near your office to Deerwood.
Okay.
And the market for homeowners, which we had to get, has really become much more difficult
Oh,
than it ever
yeah.
was. The things they made us do, they made us put a new water heater in our house we were selling.
Yeah.
They made the people who were selling us the house put a new roof on the house
Oh,
before we could get
yeah.
any coverage. It's
Uh,
a different world.
Homeowners insurance is a complete another podcast.
It is a
Yes.
complete different it's a completely separate episode. So we thank you for being our guest, and we will include your contact information in the description of our YouTube
Okay.
channel as well and our podcast. And if anyone has questions about their insurance policy or would like to discuss it with you, you're more than happy to talk to them.
Yes, I am. And I hope I was able to share something of value with y'all today.
Matt, we really appreciate you being our very first guest.
Oh,
Uh,
boy.
And
On Not Another TV Lawyer, we appreciate having you.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for your business.
always, always. Well, again, I like to go to businesses that are like my law firm, Terrell Hogan, where people actually matter and they return calls and they kind of do things the old fashioned way.
Thanks again for listening to Not Another TV Lawyer. We hope that you will tune in to the next episode.
Not Another TV Lawyer is sponsored by my law firm, Terrell Hogan Law. Terrell Hogan represents people in a lot of different areas of injury type law, as well as business claims throughout the state of Florida. We represent people in auto accidents, trip and falls, people who have been exposed to asbestos and developed conditions related to that, victims of medical negligence, victims of defective products, including medical devices and pharmaceuticals.
Please feel free to look us up at www.terrellhogan.com. We look forward to hearing and being with you soon.